Okay. Hello, welcome to the ITSS Verona video podcast series. My name is Kristina Kovalenko, and I'm the member of Southeast Asia and Oceania team. Today's topic is China and Taiwan's competition in Southeast Asia and Oceania. My guest today is Simona Grano. She's a senior lecturer and director of the Taiwan Studies Project at the University of Zurich. And we're happy to have you here. So let's get right into the questions. And first one we have is, in your opinion, how is China leveraging its Belt and Road Initiative along with newer strategic initiatives like the Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative in order to shape regional infrastructure development and economic integration in Southeast Asia and Oceania?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for this kind invitation. I'm very happy to be with you. So let's dive straight in. The first question, I think that China is leveraging a variety of plans, of projects, infrastructure, developmental, or even soft power ones that you have just mentioned, in order to extend its presence in many parts of the world where China's presence was not as felt as it is now, just, I would say, a decade ago. And in this way, especially through projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, it brings actually the development of infrastructure that is needed for China itself, because it then can expand a surplus of capacity, for example, in infrastructural development, which in China has been saturated already. But maybe a secondary aspect is that it can also compete with the United States, and to a certain extent in many parts of the world, especially in the global south or in the Pacific with many island states. It has done so better than the United States, because the United States has sort of neglected this part of the world in spreading not only infrastructural development, but also soft power, through the fact that China brings to these countries, of course, what these countries need in their daily life. And I just want to remind you, and then we can finish this long answer, that the United States, for example, in the sphere of Oceania, let's call it, actually just reopened an embassy in countries like the Solomon Islands in 2023, after having none for almost 20 years, whereas China opened it in 2019, when there was the switch between, of course, ROC Taiwan to PRC. And so in that way, of course, also diplomatically speaking, China is expanding its sphere of influence.
Thank you very much for very informative answer. And I want to ask regarding Taiwan now. In the face of China's expanding influence, what key areas of economic and political engagement is Taiwan prioritizing in Southeast Asia and Oceania? How do these efforts aim to counterbalance China's growing presence?
Right. Well, I mean, Taiwan, of course, has been trying to reduce its dependence in terms of trade from China. And to do so, Taiwan has been trying to find new trade avenues and also / diplomatic avenues. We can also talk about that in a second. And so Taiwan has launched, for example, a second southbound policy. This is called the New Southbound Policy or Initiative, which is basically an initiative launched under President Tsai Ing-wen, the former DPP president, which aimed to enhance cooperation and exchange, especially in terms of trade, but also diplomacy, between Taiwan and 18 countries in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and of course, Australasia. And so this has to be seen, I think, in the context of the fact that since 2016 in Taiwan, the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, has been back in power. And so Taiwan has been losing diplomatic allies, right? It has lost more than 10 diplomatic allies and is now left with 12. And so when it reaches diplomatic zero, some analysts think it could be problematic, but I think that it is also important to look at the fact that Taiwan is trying to actually do something about it. For example, in the sense of what I just mentioned, the new trade initiative, and especially also trying to engage with these countries by bringing them much needed sustainability help. Many of these are island nations that need help, for example, with climate change and the repercussions of it, with NGOs and philanthropics, for example, projects with environmental issues. So Taiwan is trying to engage with these countries, just to summarize, in order to compete with China. This has been done also in the 90s, the so-called dollar diplomacy, but also now at the present moment, because of what happened since 2016 in Taiwan, in order to gain back diplomatic allies through also helping them with trade.
Thank you. Now I want to ask you about states that are in this area. How countries in Southeast Asia and Oceania navigating their relationship with both China and Taiwan amidst intensifying cross-trade competition? What are the challenges and opportunities these countries face in maintaining this delicate balancing act?
Yeah, it's a complicated question because, of course, there's so many countries involved and not all of them have acted in the same way. One specific example, of course, is Nauru, which last year just switched from Taiwan to the PRC, but it had done so before. It switched from Taiwan to the PRC and then back to Taiwan between 2002 and 2005. And then it remained with Taiwan for almost 20 years and then again established diplomatic ties with the PRC last year in 2024 after the elections in Taiwan. So, I would say as a general reply to you that in the past 2 years, Taiwan has become a topic of conversation during election campaigns. For example, also in the Federated States of Micronesia and in the Solomon Islands, which are, of course, both located in the Pacific, and also in Honduras in Central America. And I think this is significant for Taiwan because the fact that Taiwan has become a focal point of electoral campaigns in these countries signifies that political parties in these countries actually understand that the Taiwan PRC issue is so divisive that they can probably also capitalize on it with the electorate. Yeah. So in all cases, I have to say that voices that are usually critical of the PRC and hope for a diplomatic shift back to ROC Taiwan usually come from politicians who are either not in government, but hope to get powerful official positions, or that were before in powerful official positions, but may have lost their chances to continue. So I think that, this indicates that there is in these countries a certain level of popular dissatisfaction with the PRC from the perspective of the kind of economic goods and results and governance that the PRC has been trying to export, for example, with the Belt and Road Initiative and other projects, and that these candidates hope to capitalize on that in order to win more popular votes. As an example could be, for example, the protests in the Solomon Islands in 2021 over the government's 2019 decision to break ties with Taiwan and establish them with the PRC. But it does, and I'm finishing here, also signal a growing concern with the influence by the PRC over the governance of these countries. And so, of course, the return to go back to have relationship with Taiwan that is a democratic country.
Okay, now I want to move on into talking about regional organizations. What role can regional organizations like ASEAN play in mitigating tensions and promoting stability in the face of growing competition between China and Taiwan?
Right. Following, I would say we need to look at these questions in the context of the US-China tension over Taiwan. So not only the China-Taiwan relationship. And I think that ASEAN, like many other countries in the world, including Europe, is caught up in this great power competition and knows that these two superpowers relationship have an impact on geopolitics, right? So you can see this from the joint communique of the 55th ASEAN foreign ministers meetings, where ASEAN countries reiterated, first of all, their support for the One China principle. But they also talked about the fact that ASEAN is concerned with the international and regional volatility, especially the recent development, in the South China Sea, but also in the Taiwan Strait, which could destabilize the region and lead to miscalculations or confrontational conflicts. And so I think that, ASEAN wants to play a constructive role in facilitating a dialogue between all these three parties including by using mechanism for de-escalating tensions or safeguarding peace. But it is, of course, not as easy. And there are many countries in Southeast Asia that have different ties with China and, of course, with Taiwan, or in this sense, with China and the US. Some of them, like the Philippines, have security pacts with the US and so are more prone to take care of their security concerns. Whereas other countries, like, for example, Vietnam or Cambodia, are known to be more China-friendly. And that sometimes can change very quickly when a new president is elected. So it's a difficult situation.
And what are the implications of China's growing military power and assertiveness in the Taiwan Strait for the security of Southeast Asian countries? How might, for example, AUKUS alliance under a new Trump administration further impact regional security dynamics?
So the second part of the question, I think it's impossible to reply at the moment because, of course, under Trump, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. I foresee that at the moment, even though he talks a lot about China and of course, the tariffs he wants to implement, but also wants to meet with Xi Jinping, Trump will be more concerned with domestic politics and things that, should happen in the United States, like immigration and so on and so forth. And that probably previous security agreements in the Indo-Pacific will not be his primary concern. I think that the implication of China's growing assertiveness in the region, we can see not only for Southeast Asian countries, but also other countries located in the vicinity. And that is the fact that these countries are increasingly trying to come to terms with the fact that they need to expand their security defenses, mechanisms, spend more on their securities. If you look at Japan, that's exactly what they are doing, increasing the budget. If you look at the Philippines, they have the skirmishes in the South China Sea together with China. That's exactly the issue. The Philippines are growing closer to the United States. So I would say, that this once again really does show the dilemma of Southeast Asian nations, which have for a long time been relying in the past 20 years on China for trade, but at the same time on the United States for security. And they do find it very difficult to find a clear response to these tensions between the two. And so if these strategic rivalry continue to occur between the US and China, I think it will continue to divide Southeast Asian nations, posing a problem also for certain unity of these nations that was there before and that helped them to attain a speedy economic growth. And at the moment, there is no consensus, but the majority agree that they do not want to choose sides between the US and China in order to sort of remain, in brackets, neutral and do not risk antagonizing one or the other side. So I think, that they appear from taking a side or a definite position, including over Taiwan. And they are, however, at the same time, very anxious about China's growing military capabilities, especially if they have a direct confrontation like the Philippines with China and long-term ambitions. And that, I believe, will be what will continue to push them to rely on the United States for security assurances.
Mhm. Thank you for this amazing video podcast. It was very informative, and I will stop recording now. I want to ask if you want to address something that, or if you want to say something to our viewers or listeners.
You mean about the topic, or?
For example, if you want.
I think it's fine for me.
Okay, thank you.